This is the Imperator with another elderly game, the 2003 title UFO Aftermath. This game was quite an interesting history, first starting as a 3D remake of the original UFO Enemy Unknown, also known as Xcom, UFO Defense, by the creator of the franchise, Julian Gollop, but was cancelled when his company, Mythos Games, declared bankruptcy in 2001. The unfinished game, which was called The Dreamland Chronicles, Freedom Ridge, was bought by the Czech studio Alter Games, makers of the cult classic Original Wars, with the intent of finishing the game. Unfortunately, they would find that what existed of Freedom Ridge to be unusable, mainly due to not having the licenses for the game engine, sound elements, or even the graphics, so they started from scratch. By the end of development, very little of the original game was used, even the story and overall plot were completely remade, though still having some similar ideas such as an alien invasion of Earth being largely successful, and having to fight to reclaim Earth from the aliens. UFO Aftermath starts with an intro showing some people in a movie theatre, but as the camera pans around we see these people aren't doing too well, with some kind of strange white spores floating in the air above them. We then get a text scroll which explains the alien ship arrived on Earth, released these spores, which then wiped out most of life on Earth, so humanity is definitely on the back foot right from the start. When you play the game for the first time, you might think this game is based in North America, but that's because the game doesn't tell you there are 3 possible starting areas, either America, Asia, or Europe. For the purpose of this playthrough and review, I'll be starting in glorious Europa, and playing on the hard difficulty. UFO Aftermath, like most XCOM-like games, has a strategic layer and a tactical layer. We'll begin with the strategic layer. When the game begins, you will control 2 bases on your starting continent. One of these bases will be a military base, and the other a development. That being, you don't start with a third kind of base, a research base. This might be a little worrying, but it's not really a big deal, as UFO Aftermath's gameplay revolves around capturing bases. There are 4 kinds of bases in UFO Aftermath: military bases, which can send out fighters to intercept enemy UFOs, as well as house your forces. Research bases, as long as you have one of these, you can do research, and every extra one reduces the time it takes to research. Third are development bases, which can both develop permanent upgrades to your forces and create equipment. The final base is the anti-biomass base, which I'll talk about a little later on. On the global map, the world is divided into territories, with each territory having a base which can be captured by both you and the aliens. In order to capture a base, you have to usually carry out around 2 missions in a territory for the capture mission to become available. You can see how much progress you have made towards that mission based on the colour of the territory. No colour means no control, a very pale blue means minimal control, a slightly brighter blue means close to full control, and finally once a territory is capturable, it will have a rather blue colour, but not quite the same as your actual controlled territory's blue. Once you capture a base, they immediately become military bases, and usually give you a one-time supply cache of various guns and equipment. You can then freely change the base to another kind or leave it as it is. Other than capture missions, there are quite a varied assortment of missions. For example, you have missions to scout an area, which only requires you to see a certain amount of different enemies. Then there's missions to destroy installations in the area, missions to capture an enemy and bring them back to the base, and of course there are missions to capture enemy UFOs that have landed or been shot down, as well as missions to rescue your own pilots that have been shot down in air battles. There are a few scripted missions, but without spoiling anything, they aren't that noteworthy. The first few having you acquire documents from Area 51 as Soviet base. Aside of those main missions, every mission is skippable. You can choose to delegate missions to the conventional military, who will succeed or fail based on which base they are coming from, with military bases having a higher chance of success. There is also some research that can be done that gives a passive boost to delegation succeeding. If they succeed, then you gain control in the territory. If they succeed at base captures, then you can capture the base without even having to fight. If they fail, the inverse happens. You lose control in the territory, and if they fail a base capture, you lose all of your control in the sector, making it a bad idea to ignore these missions. I like the idea of fighting alongside the normal military. It's one of the things I dislike about most other XCOM-like games, where it feels like it's just you against the aliens. Here it feels more like a global effort to fight them. Air combat is pretty uninteresting. You have no real control other than being able to order your forces to retreat, and the fights happen so fast you usually don't get a chance before things are largely decided. Even if you lose all your planes, the base they came from will just rebuild them for free. Also, there is no form of currency in this game. You can't sell or buy equipment. You have what you have, and if you want more you have to make it, find it in caches, or take it from enemies. The final thing of note is the strategic layer is the biomass. The biomass is a mid to late game enemy which spreads across the globe, terraforming the planet into some kind of strange mass. If the biomass spreads to one of your bases, said base is destroyed, with no chance of stopping it. This makes biomass a major threat, and one thing it can easily end a campaign if not prepared for it. But luckily you can research biomass repellers, which allow you to build the 4th kind of base, the anti-biomass base, which will passively push the biomass back and away from your territories. In this playthrough, the biomass cut through my territory, splitting my land in Western Europe from my territories in Asia, causing me to lose around 6 bases, so definitely something to be aware of. Now let's talk about the tactical layer, aka combat. This is like where most of the game will be spent. When you first start the game, you get the option to play a tutorial mission, which will introduce you to the game's controls, some basics about moving, attacking, and healing allies. After that, the game throws you in, you either sink or swim. First of all, let's talk about your soldiers. When you start the game, you always get the same two, Malcolm and Brian, and while they are consistent characters, their stats are not, which adds some randomness to the game. Soldiers have both skills and attributes. Skills affect your performance in battle and are divided into combat, defense, detection, and other. Luckily, you can hover over each of these skills and the game will tell you about them. For example, marksmanship is your ability to use sniper rifles, whereas handgun is your ability to use pistols and SMGs. Although there are no restrictions on weapons, you could have someone who's awful with a sniper use one. They just won't be as effective as someone who's actually good with the weapon. Defensive skills are all important. Psi power increases your resistance to psi attacks, hit points being health, speed being how fast your units go, and speed is king in this game. Dodge, of course, increases your chance to avoid shots. Observation is your chance to spot enemies and is quite important, but it won't help spot an enemy hiding behind a wall. Stealth is pretty useless, as enemies seem to know be able to find you no matter where you are, and in most missions you need to kill them anyway. Finally, Alien affects how much damage your soldiers do to aliens. Medical increases the amount of health your units heal when using medikits, and Capacity affects how much a soldier can carry. You can't directly affect these skills. Instead, you can control attributes. When a unit levels up, you can choose to invest a point into strength, agility, dexterity, willpower, intelligence, or perspective. Each of these attributes correlates to a few different skills. For example, strength increases your launcher's skill, throwing skill, hit points, speed, and capacity. All attributes have a max level, that being heroic, but skills have another level, super heroic. So you'll have to invest in not just one attribute, but multiple in order to get the highest level of skills. Finally, you can also order units to train. Training will increase the skills by a single level, but each kind of training can only be done once, and the skill increase can only be gained once. For example, if you did both sniper and soldier training, you would receive only 1 hit point, despite both offering improvement. Training also requires a certain attribute level, so it may be tempting to go for a jack-of-all-trades setup with your soldiers so they can receive all the benefits of training, and yes, you can do that. Next, let's talk about equipment. There are around 50 guns in the game, separated into 4 categories: sniper rifles, heavy, and handguns, although these don't tell the whole story, as shotguns count as rifles, and both pistols and SMGs come in under handguns, and that you have other, which it contains various grenades, medikits, and side devices, and armour, which of course has armour and helmets. There's a wide selection of equipment which you can equip your teams with, and most of it is finite. You'll most likely switch around which guns you use based on supply. The only equipment that you have an infinite supply of is the starting Uzi, shotgun, default grenade, and the starting armour. Personally, I mainly liked using snipers and rifles throughout the game, and neglected the other types. Now let's talk about what you'll use your weapons on. There are 3 enemy factions in the game, or maybe 2.5 would be a better description. There are the remains of the Earth population, both human and animal, which have been twisted into horrible mutants and monsters. Many of these creatures, despite being zombie-like, have some intelligence. Chompers, for example, which are based on dogs, tend to attack in groups and try to flank your forces, and the human-like creatures, which often use guns of various types. The second faction are the aliens themselves, which use strange biomechanical equipment. Their ships, guns, and armour are all grown, and once we reverse engineer them, we too will have strange growth-like armour. The final group of enemies are the biomass lifeforms. The reason I separate them from the rest of the mutants is because they only start appearing later on in the game when the biomass starts to grow over the surface of the Earth, and they can only be found within it. The designs for these creatures are all pretty horrible, which is great. There are some more wacky enemies, like strange geometrical stars and the crab car. You might think this crab is a melee fighter, but you'd be wrong. He's a mage.
Ready?
Ready, sir.
He's gone.
Good to go.
Awaiting further orders.
Yes, sir.
Good to go.
Sir, I think I got him.
Some of these enemies are hellish to fight, especially the aliens later on in the game who make liberal use of rocket launchers, which can result in a full party wipe if your forces are bunched up, or the death bellows, which spit swarms of bugs which will tear your soldiers apart if they connect. Let's talk about the actual combat. Some weapons have alternate fire modes, usually a burst or aimed mode, with aim firing less but more accurately, and burst firing multiple shots at once but less accurately. Your soldiers can also kneel, which seems to increase accuracy a little, but is mainly to make it harder to hit them. There's no real cover system in the game. When placed next to walls, soldiers will lean round them to fire at enemies, but using walls like this doesn't give them a passive boost to defense or anything like that. The main benefit of cover is it makes it harder for the enemy to both see them and hit them, but in turn makes it harder for the soldier in cover to see the enemy, and having a direct line of sight is required to attack enemies, unless you use an AoE weapon like a rocket launcher, which you can simply fire anywhere and hope it hits something. This system can and does have major consequences in battle, as making sure your soldiers have line of sight of the enemy can be the difference between winning a battle or having all your soldiers die. You can also make use of the system by, for example, using a soldiers to scout and gain line of sight on the enemy, then using snipers who have much farther range to snipe them. The enemy won't be able to respond unless they gain line of sight, and will most likely just walk towards your snipers in the hopes of spotting them before they die. When most units take critical damage, they fall into a down state and can no longer fight. This applies to both you and many of the enemies, though there are a few that can't be downed and must be killed. When one of your soldiers are downed, you can use a medikit to heal them and get them back into the fight, but after the battle they'll need to recuperate for a few days before they can be deployed again. This is the only disadvantage to taking damage other than dying. Even if one of your soldiers loses most of their health, as long as they don't get downed, they can be sent out in another mission immediately. When it comes to enemies, there isn't much of a reason to finish them off when they go down, and leaving them down preserves ammos, and any downed enemies are captured at the end of the battle. This is important for aliens, as interrogating them is required to progress your tech, but capturing mutants gives a small bonus to autopsy research of said mutant. There's no form of bleeding in the game, so you don't have to worry about your own or enemy units dying after being downed. You do have to worry about other enemies finding your downed soldiers and murdering them, so it's better to heal them and bring them along than leaving them downed. Other than that, combat is a fairly traditional affair. You shoot at the enemy and they shoot back. You don't have any form of melee attack, so you'll be using ranged weapons from start to finish. Ammo is also modelled in the game, so you need to make sure to bring enough to keep your soldiers supplied on the battlefield. All weapons do different types of damage, and some enemies are resistant to certain kinds of damage. Ironically, the basic hard weapons you start off with are useful from start to finish, while the laser and plasma weapons you can research and create are good against mutants, but not great against aliens due to alien armour being made to counter these types of damage. Now let's discuss the story and plot. The story begins after the initial alien attack, which wipes out most of life on Earth. What's left of humanity unites under the Council of Earth, or COE. You were placed in charge of an elite squad and told that you're to lead humanity's attempts to liberate the Earth from the invaders, as well as the mutants that now occupy most of the world. Like most Xcom style games, most of the story is told through research logs. The first of these logs will mainly be autopsies of the mutants, and you'll quickly find that all the mutants are Earth life forms that have been twisted into horrible monsters. Even worms, dogs, birds, and of course humans have been zombified and sent against what's left of humanity. Then once you start fighting the aliens, you'll learn about their biomechanical lifestyle, with even their ships being grown around a living host. You can actually see the host during the ship missions, but they are embedded deep within the walls with no way to access. This is where I will draw the spoiler line. From this point on, I will spoil major aspects of the game's story, as well as its two endings. As such, I will also be spoiling which ending is canon for the sequel, so this is your chance to pause the video, skip ahead, or start watching entirely. In the description there will be links to the post-spoiler segments, so you don't have to guess when said spoilers stop. Alright, so one of the things that is revealed after visiting Area 51 and Soviet installation is the aliens have actually been on Earth for around 50 years and set up embassies in major human countries like the US. These aliens travel through space using large portals that they build in solar systems. So who are the invaders? They are a splinter group of extremists. The first thing they did once arriving in our solar system is destroy the portal leading to the rest of the alien empire. The ambassadors on Earth tried to warn the Earth leaders of the coming attack, but there wasn't much humanity could do to prepare themselves for what was to come. The extremists then attacked Earth and prioritised killing their brethren on the surface. During the game you can find the last survivors of the friendly aliens, and some of them will join you as soldiers. I personally didn't use them to avoid spoilers in my footage. They also can't wear armour and can only use alien weaponry, making them very rigid in what they can be used for. After finding the friendly aliens, they tell you that it will take around 20 years for their forces to arrive on Earth without the portal, so they won't be of much help. It's up to humanity to turn things around. And then the biomass appears, making things much worse. It will quickly spread over the surface of the Earth and destroy your bases if it reaches them. You have to quickly carry out missions on the biomass surface in order to research countermeasures in the form of the anti-biomass bases you can then create. Once you do research on the biomass, you learn about the aim of the extremists. The biomass is a collective consciousness which intends to absorb all matter on Earth. After that, you gain the ability to research the reticulum offer, which leads to the extremists contacting you directly with an offer of peace of sorts. They say that they can now respect humanity because of your stalwart resistance, but say the sacrifice of humanity and the Earth was necessary in order to create the creature they are making, in their own words, a god, which will obey them. So they offer peace and a place for humanity to live. Off Earth, they also offer to rescue as many humans as they can left on the surface. They then offer humanity a seat on their council, as they want humanity's voice to be heard in the years to come. So looking at this offer, just as it stands, it's a pretty good one. Humanity gets to survive and be one of the factions that controls the new god, which will be born on Earth. The downside is that humanity loses the Earth and is willingly putting their lives in the hands of these extremists, which might not work out down the line when the alien empire finally makes its way here, but surely a god can deal with an alien empire or two, right? Accepting this offer leads to the canon ending. We get a shot of the Earth completely overtaken by the biomass, together with a horrible roar, and that's the end. As I said, this is the canon ending, and leads into the sequel, UFO Aftershock. But what if we refuse the offer? Then the game continues. You decide to attack an alien ship and steal it for a daring all-or-nothing attack on the alien base, which the COE concludes must be on the moon. After that, you land on the moon for the final battle. Fight your way into the alien base, fight some strange enemies you've never seen before, then blow up some giant worms that your scientists believe to be the queens that direct the biomass consciousness. And that's victory. We get a shot of some children looking at a book in a ruin on Earth, and then a shot of the Earth de-biomassed, and then back to the main menu. We did it, humanity bros. We won. Although it wasn't much of a victory, with most of humanity dead, and not just humanity, the Earth's normal population, such as most of the animals, are probably extinct, but a win's a win. At the very minimum, humanity is able to defend the Earth from whatever plot the aliens had for it, to turn it into some giant biological space god, so at least we did our civic duty in that regard and defended our planet. Now, let's talk about the things I liked about this game. I like that you can delegate missions. It helps make the conflict feel like a group effort from humanity. My only wish is that we could actually see some of the COE forces fighting the enemy, but that's one of my complaints about a lot of XCOM style games. It largely feels like a you versus the alien scenario instead of a humanity versus the alien scenario. I think the game does a good job of making it feel like a real global war. I also quite like the leveling system, but then I never really liked the do things to gain stats system we see in other XCOM likes, which tend to encourage running back and forth, for example, to level up agility, or mind controlling aliens, taking off all their weapons, shooting them, then healing them to level a weapon skill. I really enjoy the dark dystopian setting. It really feels like humanity has lost the war on day one and is desperately struggling against undefeatable odds. Even the maps feel like this. Humanity's city is littered with the corpses of both humans and animals, with those unlucky enough to survive transforming into horrible monsters. The soundtrack isn't anything amazing, but suits the setting and helps create the depressing atmosphere. I also quite like the real-time combat. It makes battles go very quickly. Unlike in other XCOM likes where you have to spend a long time ending your turns, moving across the map, everything here moves very fast. Finally, I really like that you don't have to kill every enemy in a mission. You only have to complete your mission, whether that's kill a certain amount of enemies or rescue a pilot. You aren't forced to kill everything, but you can if you want to, in order to gain extra experience. Okay, so all of my problems with this game are mainly due to the quality of life and technical issues due to its age. To start with, there is no autosaves. I don't think I need to go into detail on this one. If you aren't the kind of person that makes a manual save at the start and end of every mission, you'll likely suffer a great deal when you have to load an older save. To make matters worse, I experienced a few crashes during the game, which of course meant lost progress. Thankfully, there weren't many of these, less than 10 overall, but they still happened, and it definitely drags down the experience. You can't actually recruit soldiers, the game just gives them to you seemingly randomly, which feels very strange. I understand the idea that you're an elite force, and the main army sends you the best as they find them, but still, no way to get more people just feels strange. I feel like it may be tied to the fact there's no currency, so if you did recruit soldiers, what would you spend to get them? Also, why do we only have one helicopter? We're the last of humanity's military. We throw thousands of jets at them, but we only have a single helicopter? It feels very strange. It means you can only ever have one active squad, which means no B team. If you take losses or injury in your main team, you just replace them with other recruits. There's no reason to have a fully leveled and equipped B team. Some enemies can be really unpleasant to fight. For example, the enemies with rocket launchers. You would think a rocket launcher won't have 100% accuracy, but these ones do. The only thing you can do if they fire on you is scatter and hope your soldiers move fast enough to escape. I rarely experienced a full party wipe, but when I did, it was because of these guys. I like to think it was because I was playing on hard that made them so annoying. I don't remember having this negative experience when I played on moderate previously, though that was quite a few years ago. Finally, I'll mention there was no auto-fire. Your soldiers will never attack an enemy without your orders personally. I don't mind this, but I know some people would find it annoying that their soldiers won't attack enemies that are right in front of them without their express orders to do so. So, my final verdict. I think this game has a lot of unique ideas that makes it worth attempting a playthrough, but I can't really recommend it for people who aren't major fans of the genre. Even then, I would only recommend it to people who are looking for a unique take on XCOM-like games. Unfortunately, there aren't really any other games that have expanded on the ideas in this one outside of its sequels, which have their own problems. And Phoenix Point, which has something similar as the biomass spreading across the globe, but outside of that has very little similarities. But with all that said, I found the game enjoyable, and for the price this game is, it's hard not to recommend it. That being just £3.39 or $4.27. It's available on both GOG and Steam, and right now it's only 69 pence on GOG until the 21st of February. And for that price, I can't help but recommend it to anyone who's even slightly interested in the game. Also, this video is not sponsored. I just noticed that when I was looking up about prices about the game and stores it was on. Thank you for watching my video. If you liked it, maybe like and subscribe. If you disliked it, maybe subscribe, then immediately unsubscribe and dislike, in order to make your displeasure known. If you've played this game, I would love to hear your thoughts on it in the comments below. Feel free to call me out on things I missed or outright got wrong. It's quite a large game, so I wouldn't be surprised if I missed something. Will I make videos on the sequels? Aftershock? Definitely. Afterlife? Maybe. I didn't really like Afterlife, and I've never actually finished it, so I would probably need to invest some time in it either way. These sorts of games are quite exhausting, so I don't expect an Aftershock video too soon. But what will the next video be? Will it be a turn-based, management and detective-like game? You play as a cult leader, and it's that time of year again, so you have to begin sacrificing people to your evil god. It also has quite a few different colour schemes. Feel free to guess in the comments below. Thank you again, and see you next time.